All right, hi everybody. I'm Bill Biko of Alberta Eviction, and today I have an interview with Marv Steier of Tenant Verification Services Inc. They're also known as TVS. So, as you know, screening and verifying tenants is something I like to talk about, and it is my number one priority when it comes to making sure I place the best possible tenants in my property. And that's why I'm so excited to be able to talk to Marv and share this conversation with you. So, to get started, Marv, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about TVS?
Sure. Hi, Bill.
Hi.
Well, I got started in this business about 12 years ago, I guess. I was with the RCMP's fraud section for about 20 years, and actually with the fraud section for 8 years with the RCMP for 20 years. And during that 8-year tenure with the fraud section, and that was in Surrey, British Columbia, where almost nothing happens, and I'm being facetious here, we had a lot of landlords come into our office and complain about being ripped off by tenants, damaging property, not paying rent, just taking a lot of advantage of them. And there was very little that the police could do, and very little that Crown Council was even willing to do. They said, you have a civil contract with them, they've signed a lease agreement with them, so it's a civil matter. Police won't get involved.
Exactly.
So we sent them away. And meanwhile, this, was continuing to happen. So as a result of that, some years later, I was also an investigator with the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, a insurance fraud investigator, and then a fraud investigator with the Royal Bank of Canada, with our corporate security department. And all of these fraud situations would arise, and the victim in almost every instance was never monetarily compensated. Yeah, we'd get the odd conviction in court, and the guy would either get a slap on the wrist in most cases because it's a fraud, or in the odd more serious case, a few months jail. But the victim was never compensated. So about 12 years ago, I decided that this was a good business to get into, because there were very few services in Canada at the time that did this sort of thing. So I got started. And currently we're in Canada, right across Canada, and in the USA, so we're a North American tenant screening company.
Excellent.
And that brings us today.
Okay. So, and this is where we get to the important part. Like tenant screening, again, is just so important. And this is where a service like TVS can be very important. So can you explain what TVS does and how they can help landlords?
Yeah, basically what TVS does is provides landlords and property managers with tools that they can use to conduct some due diligence or some tenant screening on prospective tenants. And we also give landlords some tips and advice, and we have guides like you do, Bill, to assist them with their tenant screening process. Now what we do is go to the credit bureau and get consumer credit reports, which landlords can't get on their own. Property management companies can, because they have a big enough volume that they can go directly to the credit bureaus, but the smaller landlords don't. And our niche market is with smaller landlords and small to medium-sized property management companies. Yeah, in addition to the credit reports that we obtain from the two major credit bureaus, Equifax and TransUnion, we network the residential rental industry in Canada and the US, and we help to identify high-risk tenants and low-risk tenants. So TVS members can report tenant pay habits to our database, good and bad, and that benefits the good tenants, because we have what we call a certificate of satisfactory tenancy that can be issued to a good tenant at the end of the lease period. And of course, the high-risk tenants, or the bad tenants, are negatively impacted, because every landlord that uses our service, and currently we have about 6,000 members across Canada, every landlord will have that information and can choose not to rent to that individual because they negatively impacted their current or previous landlord.
Now that's going to be very interesting to a lot of the landlords that come to my site and I talk to. They're quite often asking for information on where they can report bad tenants and find information out about tenants that don't pay as well. And I understand there's a few little catches with this. Do the tenants have to sign some stuff initially when they sign up with the landlords? Is that true?
Good point. Yes, absolutely. So in order for a landlord to obtain a consumer credit report, they do have to have written consent from the tenant. But this is standard in the industry in Canada and right across the US. And in the US, they've been doing this for years. But on most rental application forms that you get either from the province, from the provincial website, or from the TVS website, the consent clause is at the bottom of the rental application.
Okay. And is there specific wording that you require for your company versus other companies, or it's just a generic consent?
It's pretty generic, but
Okay.
we have our own at the bottom of the rental application, as does the provincial websites, but it's pretty standard.
Okay. So that sounds all pretty interesting, and this is going to be an easy one for you. But why should all landlords use a service like yours? Isn't it just great to see that a tenant seems nice?
And go on gut feeling?
Yeah.
Sure. What TVS does more than anything is it helps to reduce the risk of income loss with the tools that we provide. Now, when a landlord has the tenant complete a rental application with the information, we've seen a lot of instances where, for example, the rental application is only completed halfways, or the handwriting is illegible, or there's false information. So how does a landlord determine that the information is accurate that's on the rental application? Well, the one way is to compare that information to the information on the consumer credit report. Does the name, date of birth, address match? That's what you want to know, because if it comes time for the eviction process, you have to complete a form with the individual's name on it. And if you're not able to serve that individual with documents, you probably don't have a hope in where to ever find that individual.
Yeah.
So getting a consumer credit report is a valuable tool to have. A, it identifies the individual for you and helps you to determine the truthfulness of that individual. And secondly, it tells you whether or not their pay habits are good or bad. So you can establish that fact from the consumer credit report as well. So those are a couple of reasons why a landlord should use TVS. Secondly, we do have forms, as you do, Bill, with your site, that are very beneficial for landlords. We have a landlord guide. We have a tenant guide. And what we preach here at TVS is that every landlord should educate their tenant. Every landlord should know their rights and responsibilities, and every tenant should know their rights and responsibilities. And where that happens, there'll be far fewer problems with the renting experience.
Great points there. I'm just going to mention this one also. You have an applicant verification report that you run, and that basically just verifies that the tenants themselves are who they say they are when they fill out the applications, because that's one of the issues that pops up every now and then as well, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so members can, and a good point, and I didn't mention that, but yes, you can also get an applicant identification search via the credit bureaus on our site. However, if you order the credit reports, it's probably pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
And you can establish the identity from the credit report. On our website, and we have some educational websites as well, criminalfraud.com, for example, if you go there and click on landlord fraud, it tells you how to interview other landlords, and it gives you some tips and advice on how to establish the truthfulness of a tenant. You have to be somewhat deceptive, so you have to be a Sherlock Holmes in order to find out some of this information.
Well, that's great. I'll make sure to add that in the notes for the rest of this. Okay. Okay, here's another really tough one for you. How much does your service cost? And I also understand you have a membership as well. So if you can just explain maybe about those two areas.
Sure. There's no membership fee, there's no annual fee, and no additional cost to join the service or use the service. It's a pay-as-you-go service. So you pay for the reports that you order. And the regular price for a report from either TransUnion or Equifax, I believe, is $22 and some cents. That includes the taxes. If you're a member of RAIN or a member of the Edmonton Apartment Association, you will get a reduced price for that. And we have different scales, so you would have to tell the operators at the time you set up. It goes anywhere from $15.95, and I believe RAIN members and Edmonton Alberta Apartment members get the same report for $11 and some cents.
Excellent. All right.
So it's cheap insurance.
Well, and exactly, and this is something that landlords have to realize. This, spending $20 or $30 or even $100 to make sure that you've got the proper tenant in place will save you so much money over the long term and so many headaches.
Correct. Bill, you know better than anybody how much money it costs to evict a tenant.
Yeah.
And it's not just the costs of eviction, it's the downtime that you're not renting the apartment and or the residence, the rental.
Yeah.
And if you've had a marijuana grow up or if you've had willful damage, it costs a whole lot more. So do you spend that $10 or $20 up front, or do you spend that $3,000 or $30,000 later on?
Exactly. All right, that's great stuff. Okay, this question is also going to be pretty interesting, I think, to a lot of the listeners here. But what do you see as the biggest challenge that many landlords are currently facing these days?
Well, I think you say it on your website, Bill, that tenants appear to have more rights than landlords in just about every province in Canada. And particularly where landlords don't know what they're doing, they don't have a process, they don't have a checklist to follow, and don't know what their responsibilities are, they can be taken to the cleaners by tenants who do know their rights and responsibilities. So the biggest challenge for landlords today, I would say, are knowing your rights and responsibilities, following the rules and regulations of your provincial Residential Tenancies Act, and using common sense. Do an inspection of your rental every 6 weeks. You're the boss. You need to take control of your rental, and you need to treat your rental as a business. It is a business.
Exactly.
And landlords fail to take responsibility for their business. They expect everybody else to solve their problems, either the residential tenancy office or someone to come in and evict the tenants or whatever the case may be. But and don't get me wrong, a lot of landlords do this, and they're very good at what they do. But some of the smaller landlords don't do it, and that's where they run into trouble. So I guess the biggest challenge they face is in educating themselves in conducting their business in a professional manner.
Okay, that's great advice there, Marv. So I'd really like to thank you for taking the time to talk to me about this stuff, and I'm kind of hoping we can do this again and go into a little more detail with some of these other areas that I'm sure people are interested to hear about.
Sure.
Okay. So for everybody listening, I will have TVS's website listed below, and it should show up on the video when I'm done editing all this as well. There is some great information. I've looked around on their site quite a few times, and they've got some great articles listed up there. As Marv mentioned, there is the landlord guide as well, and some other resources for you. So if you have a chance, get over there and take a look. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this recording. Have a great day.